it's an all open, all memorial reading, so we'll be reading primarily, or if not all, poetry of mentors, teachers, influences who have passed away. Our first reader tonight is going to be Katie Towler. You probably know her as much as a fiction writer, a novelist, a trilogist. Is that what they call people who write 3 books? A trilogist, a well-known trilogist, and also a poet herself, and of course is the author of The Penny Poet of Portsmouth, which just came out in paperback. So it would be a wonderful Easter present for someone. It put them in the Easter basket, or we got or better yet, graduation. And Robert would be a good in today's day and age. We could use a little bit more Robert in our lives, and so she'll be reading some Robert poems and then a short excerpt from the book. And we're glad to have her with us tonight, Katie Towler.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for putting this together. This is really a wonderful way to celebrate the poets who've meant so much to us. And Robert, of course, is very high on my list of those poets. Robert was a mentor of sorts to me, maybe also a challenger to me in many ways. He challenged me to think hard, to read thoroughly, to write to the best of my ability, and the example he set in doing those things. And he also, I think in many ways, was a great mentor on how to live one's life. He was so devoted to what mattered to him most. He put that first. And I think he was a very happy and content person because of that. And I often, now, 9 years after his death, I still think of that often, think of him very often, and try to live a little bit more the way Robert lived. So I'm going to read a selection of his poems. This first one is from his second chapbook, which is called A Cantata for Groundhog Day, and was published in 1971. People in this part of town move once every 3 months, meaning one family moved 6 months ago, and one man sleeps in a different doorway every night, and some people never move at all, from one place to another, in the southwest corner of a mill town, on the edge of a whirl of stars. Those who do not add numbers are doomed to repeat them, and an average is a lie about several people. This next one is one of the only longer poems Robert ever wrote, and he published this himself as a chapbook in 1975, Evidence of Johnny Appleseed. And as Marie Harris has said, this is the closest we have to an autobiography from Robert. It begins with an epigraph. From the report of the Society for Printing, Publishing, and Circulating the Writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, Manchester, England, January 14th, 1817. There is in the Western country a very extraordinary missionary of the New Jerusalem. A man has appeared who seems to be almost independent of corporeal wants and sufferings. He goes barefooted, can sleep anywhere, in-house or out of house, and lives on the coarsest and most scanty fare. He has actually thawed the ice with his bare feet. And now this is the poem. Name, John Chapman. By occupation, a gatherer and planter of apple seeds. There's a monument, he isn't under it, and stories of Johnny Appleseed in Arkansas from people who haven't seen him. Rumors of his passing through Oregon and Vermont, and a general silence of history books, but then any fool can start a war. Born September 26, 1774 and 1775 in Leominster, Springfield, and Boston. Born, in fact, several times in any number of places. Educated variously at Harvard or not. Read in a book called Heaven and Its Wonders and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg most of his life. Left the pages everywhere. Conversed with angels. and is not known to have eaten animals or people. Died on March 15th or 18th, 1845 or 1847, frequently in good company. Leaving one old horse, an empty sack, several far patches of ground containing young apple trees secured against surrealists, and enough money to bury him somewhere. Leaving a story and a dream, trees that he planted, and scions of trees. Imagine a map showing apple trees and on it a figure moving. A small man to look at with bright eyes and night black hair, always in motion, even when standing still like a hummingbird. Seen passing by roads and passing by rivers with a timber wolf for company. Sharing a cave with bears whose reputation as grudging hosts is on the whole unjust. Passing peacefully among people driven by drink and despair to murder, and peacefully among pioneers driven to murder by drink, despair, and the Bible. Carrying his peace with him and his hope and a bag of apple seeds, and coming where there is no way to go, becomes the way. Becomes in time a man of steadfast wisdom or a first-class fool, which is substantially the same thing. You can order young apple trees by mail, to say nothing of blue pearmains and Cox's orange pippins, also the heavenly arcana in 30 volumes bound in green cloth, untouched by human hands. But when you plant a seed, right hand and left hand are witnesses. This is from Robert's book that was published in 1983, Quo Musa Tendus, and it has a title, Public Notice. They've taken away the pigeon lady who used to scatter breadcrumbs from an old brown hand and then do a little pigeon dance right there on the sidewalk with a flashing of purple socks, to the scandal of the neighborhood. This is no world for pigeon ladies. There's a certain wild gentleness in this world that holds it all together, and there's a certain tame brutality that just naturally tends to ruin and scatteration and nothing left over. Between them, it's a very near thing. This is no world without pigeon ladies. Now, world, I know you're almost uglied out, but just think, try to remember. What have you done with the pigeon lady? This is untitled. They keep watch, and so it is with them, painters and sculptors, all who shape carefully what they see and imagine, and commonly stay up all night. Morning is coming, and night too, and the city turns in its haunted sleep. They keep watch, and so it is with them. And this last one is from one of Robert's penny books, 1985. The title of the little book was Heirs. And the title of this poem is Rumors, and I think it speaks to America in 2017. I hear you can tell the trees apart by the sound of the wind in their branches. The sighing of pines is nothing at all like the wind in the willows. Elms in full foliage gently rustle, aspen are easily rattled. All under the eaves of life they tend, oaks to creak at a higher pitch, and maples more apt to tap imperiously at your window. And I have heard the news, and so have you, so let us talk of things indifferent, and the wind will tell the trees apart by the rumors passing through. So I will just finish with a little short bit, a little portrait of Robert from my memoir. I often ran into Robert in the afternoon, marking a stooped path along Congress Street to the post office. If I stepped directly in front of him and said hello when I met him in the post office lobby, he would raise his eyes and return the greeting. I felt that I had committed an act of violation when I did this. On the street, I would see him approaching and ready myself to speak, but when he did not look up, I would let him move past and go on. Sometimes I stopped to watch him from a distance, thinking that I might absorb a bit of his quiet concentration. I recognized that in comparison to Robert, I had been, and still was, a flighty butterfly ricocheting between the world of people and the world of my writing. His focused attention had clearly been honed through years of practice. His cadence was measured as though he were considering each step before committing to it, his feet going before the rest of his body. This gave him the appearance of moving at an angle, pulling himself along. If it rained or snowed, he added a pair of old-fashioned rubbers over his shoes, propped a tweed cap on his head, and wrapped an orange scarf around his neck. These were his only concessions to the weather. I got to know Robert to the extent that I could be said to know him, through our chance meetings on the street, though a brief exchange of glances was sometimes our only communication. I would remember his averted eyes, as if to suggest we both had more important business at hand than trading common pleasantries, when I returned home to my desk. When I lost faith in my writing, I thought of him next door making his penny collections of poems. If he could carve such a unique and wonderful life for himself, surely I could keep writing despite the rejections and dubious prospects for publication. Thank you.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
I'm going to be reading some Bill Knott poems. I studied with Bill down at Emerson College for the good part of 3 years. Bill taught there, I don't know, from the 70s or 80s up until about 2010, 2012, something like that, until he retired. And there was about the only thing cliched about Bill was the fact that he became more famous after his death probably than during, even though he was, you know, he had some, he was published with, I mean, we can't feel bad for him. He was published with Random House. He won the University of Iowa Prize. He had a selected with University of Pittsburgh Press. So, I mean, it wasn't like he was under the. But here it is. His new book is out with FSG, and the word is that Bill he had put one book out with FSG, and the word is that Jonathan Glassy himself, about as big a time editor as you could, had sought him out for a selected back in the day, and Bill, feigning modesty, which he did often, I'm not sure if it was true or not, he was hard to gauge sometimes, said that he couldn't come up with more than 100 pages, and Jonathan said, well, if it's not 200, 250 pages, we're not going to put one out. So they just waited till he died, and now we get the 200 pages. But yeah, it's been very good. He was in the New Yorker last week. This week he's in the New York Times Book Review and the New York Times Magazine. And Billy Collins last year, I don't know where he was when he was alive, but Billy Collins wrote this for last year's pick for poetry books to read. He picked this upcoming book that hadn't even been released yet. The one thing I do like, the best part about this piece is the fact that he makes, it's not a long case, but people long tried to kind of pigeonhole Bill into this kind of experimental kind of, which he wasn't at all. He wrote in meter, he wrote in strict form. He had a very soft spot for puns. He really used just about every available tool and that the box provided. And so Billy makes a case for him essentially being, you know, right there, square in the lyric as we know it, not too far to one direction. So anyway, they had a celebration for him at Emerson a couple of weeks ago, which I was able to attend. Bill had been estranged from many of his friends. Tom Lux was a good friend in the early going. He's the one that edited the new book. And they hadn't talked to each other in, I think, about 30 years. And supposedly, so the one thing good about the reading was I got updates as far as Bill had moved from Cambridge back to his hometown, or home area in Michigan. He was orphaned as a child. His mother died in childbirth a few years after he was born. And then his father killed himself soon after that. Bill ended up in an orphanage and was institutionalized for a spell. So the fact that he went back to how Michigan suited him for his purposes as a home, I don't know. But anyway, he went back there, and Also, his literary executor, who was teaching at Central Michigan University, was there, and got to talk. We got to learn a little bit about what transpired after Bill retired. One of the things that was very nice to hear was the fact that Bill had been living there a couple of years, and I don't know who contacted who, but someone contacted Tom Lux about doing a reading there. And Tom Lux actually went and stayed with Bill for a short time. And they not only made peace, but the executor said that at the end, Tom told him that he loved him, and Bill said that he loved him back, and so they had made some peace. And then Tom, of course, who just died a month ago, spent the last year or two of his life working on Bill's book, and pretty much said it was the high point of his life as a poet. And then he went back afterwards and just spent time in Bill's apartment afterwards, just kind of absorbing the... So anyway, I'm going to start off with a couple of poems from the book. Bill did a lot of short poems as well, and he did a lot of extremely long poems. And one of the other poems that he was most well known for is love poems, and a lot of people don't think of him as a love poem poet or love poet. We don't have many love poets in the U.S. I don't know what that says about us. We don't have a lot of political poems either. But Bill wrote a lot of love poems, and he wrote them to the love interest / muse Naomi. And I'll read a couple of the Naomi poems. Naomi poem. With the toys of your nape, with your skin of mother-of-throw pearls, and your fire-sodden glances from the sidelong world, we break rivulets off the river and wave them in the air. Remember, the world has no experience at being you. We also are loving you for the forevereth time. The light torn from leaf and cry, even your shoulders are petty crimes. And then this other Naomi poem. The beach holds and sifts us through her dreaming fingers. Summer fragrances green between your legs. At night, naked auras cool the waves. Vanished. Oh, Naomi, I kiss every body of you, every face. And then I'm going to read this poem that one of his more famous poems that he wrote for Tom Lux. And I noticed, if you want, I used to think I did a pretty mean Bill Nott impersonation. But then I was just listening to Bill. I implore you to go check him out. There's a University of Arizona reading. About the same time I was taking him as a teacher. I just cannot believe, I can't think of Bill going around on a bus out west. I wish I could make a film of it, because it would be riotous. And I remember him coming back from it, and he was like, Mark, see, I don't even know if I sound like him anymore. They were like, Mark, I'm never getting on a bus again. and he did very few readings after that. I think it killed him. I think it really killed him. But he went out, you can go online, and there's a pretty good serving of his poetry from 1987. He was in his prime. He'd just come out with books from Random House, and he was really kind of he gave it one last shot, I think. And so there's this excellent reading, and he does this poem. I got up at the end. I wasn't planning on at the celebration. They hadn't said there was going to be any sort of opening at the end or anything. Thank God, because I would have eaten the inside of my stomach if I knew I was going to have to go up there. But the last minute they said if anyone else wants to come up, so I went up there, and I did kind of a half a Bill impersonation. I mean, when I say impersonation, I'm just kind of conjuring him up. I wasn't doing Star Black, who's very good friends with him, seemed to think I did a pretty good. She told me to go on the web with it. She was so convinced of its. But I don't think I'll do it for Mitts and Gloves. But you can go on. I'll do. I'll try to read it, give you some flavor. But go online and read Mitts and Gloves. It's well worth it. So this is for Tom Lux, who was other than poetry, is known to be a huge baseball fan. And Bill didn't know anything about baseball, so he said, "What a perfect place to write from." It's called Mitts and Gloves for Tom Lux. The catcher holds a kangaroo fetus in his. The first baseman grips a portable hair blower, but everyone else just stares into theirs, punching a fist into it, stumped, trying to come up with a proper occupant. The pitcher, for example, thinks a good stout padlock would go right in there, but the left fielder, perhaps influenced by his environment, opts for a beer can. The shortstop, informative about the ratio of power to size, says, transistor, you know, radio. The second baseman, however, he just stands and grins and flapjacks his from hand to hand and back again, second base dopey as always. Alas, cries the third baseman, this void of vacancy, pure space beyond our defiant emptiness, abyss, haunted by the kiss of balls we have not missed. Oh, absence Delise. The right fielder looks disgusted at this. He just snorts, hawks, spits into his and croaks, hey look, heck, my char of tobacco fits it perfect. The team goes numb, mum, cowhided by the rectitude of his position, the logic. Only the center fielder, who was going back while this discussion was going on, putting jets on his cleats to catch the proverbial long one. Does he perhaps have a suggestion? As for the ball, off in mid-air it dreamily scratches its stitches and wonders what it will look like tomorrow when it wakes up and the doctor removes its bandages. Coda. Mitts are white-collar professionals designed for first base, home plate, unique, elite, and therefore moral. The glove, on the other hand, is human and can be worn interchangeably by all players, dirty, low down, dumb. I'm forced to admire the mitt, but free in theory to love gloves.
Thank you, Bill.
And I'll just end with this, with a Tom Lux poem over here. Yeah, I mean, to have him go and just yeah. Anyway, what can one say except read? Ode to the joyful ones, and Tom did this. He was channeling Bill all the time. When I first time I saw him read, I said, "Oh boy, he stole everything." Ode to the joyful ones. And it starts with an excerpt from the Anglican prayer, shield your joyful ones. That they walk, even stumble among us is reason to praise them or protect them. Even the sound of a lead slug dropped on a lead plate, even that for them is music. Because they bring laughter's brief amnesia. Because they stand talking, taking pleasure in others, with their hands on their shoulders of strangers and the shoulders of each other. Because you don't have to tell them to walk toward the light. Because if there are 2 pork chops, they will give you the better one. Because they will give you the crutch off their backs. Because when there are 2 of them together, their shining fills the room. Because you don't have to tell them to walk toward the light.
I like that. Nice poem.
All right. And our first, we're glad to have him back. This is the last, I just don't have the, when John used to have this, he used to have crazy stamina. He used to just go, you know. And so I cut off, I think he went through June. He might have gone right through the summer, I don't even know. I cut off, last year we went to May because I think we had Katie here. But I think this is going to be something I'm going to do every year.
You have to move on.
I'm going to move on. So John is next. This is the last reading of the year. Just I needed to get that out. Now I'm sitting down.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. It was needed. It was necessary. I was talking you up, John.
Yeah, I was getting embarrassed.
Oh, okay.
I dressed the part tonight.
I read dead people. That's right.
Oh, I could have said I did read people. I made a mistake too, in not following the rules.
What's that?
I made a mistake in the rule. I didn't realize this was a writing about. I wrote about Pat Parnell. She's still alive.
She is.
It's her birthday.
Is it a birthday?
It's her birthday.
Oh, okay.
Well then.
You're forgiven.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. A birthday poem for Pat. Winnipesaukee. The mail boat pulls away from the Wolfboro dock, cuts the clear water. But no, it's early spring. The ice holds the lake. But I hold his memory, frozen into a world that is mine. The lake, the mountains, the towns, the schools, the poems, the friends that crowd my mind. Without time, a world always spring. April is a good time. April is a good time for ice out. And in honor of full moon, I read another poem called Thunder Moon. It's the buck moon or the thunder moon. We watch for it from the beach, the sun disappearing behind us, behind the trees. While in front the ocean waves wash the sand. A family of ducks surfing the sea, and in the east a thin mist at the horizon, a gentle white that is, in fact, moon color. Then, still a miracle, coalescing into a full circle, formed in the mist, more than the mist, becomes itself the full moon in Capricorn, the full moon rising above the world. Watch it climb, watch it follow, watch it thunder, thunder moon.
Is Pat okay?
Oh yeah,
Oh, she's usually here for these.
yeah, I expected her to be
she
here.
hasn't been coming for a while.
Oh, really?
No.
She's been here a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael Johnston.
She's here.
She was at the pool last week.
Was she? Yeah.
Hi. They're dead, right?
Ideally.
Yeah. So I went with that, and I'm not a poet. I'm an artist, and what I found in art was ink, and this was I've got a thing going for the bridge, and I love the drama of the ink, right? And that's been a long time going, and also I'm getting older, right? So when I came across this, it was an interesting thing about the poems that would mean so much to you, and what I took was not the poet, but the experience of the poem. And when I was in school, I got in this course with British literature, and I felt very distant from it. And then when I met my wife, and she introduced me to American poetry and American literature, I thought, what the hell was I doing? Why wasn't I starting with American literature and stuff? But then I was really struggling with this thing, and yet this is one of Shakespeare's number 65 that when I first came across it, I was too young, and then reading it again and knowing what I do, I'm really glad that I found it and I've kept it. But I also want to try and read it more like an American. I find when people, I don't know, I just find there's a poetic voice, and I kind of like it, and I also get irritated by it. You know, it's 65, Shakespeare sonnet. Since brass, nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power. How will this rage show beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than a flower? Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wrackful siege, battering days? When rocks impregnable are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong, but time decays. It's a fearful meditation. Where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? Or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? Or who his spoil of beauty can forbid? And none, unless this miracle have might, that in black ink my love may still shine bright. Thank you.
Our next reader is S. Stephanie.
I snuck in before someone else, my apologies, but I can't stay for the whole thing. And I'm actually reading two people because Bob Braille was going to come and read Walter Butts's poems, and so I did not prepare to read them, but then Bob called all of a sudden this evening and said he wasn't going to, so I'm going to try to read one of Walter's poems, just so we can include him. Because he was a pretty big deal. To me, anyway. I'll read this poem called, so bear with me, please, because I haven't practiced this. I'll read this poem called Ash that he wrote for Keith Cosmic, who was his best friend, more like his brother. Walter didn't have any siblings, and if he did, Keith would be one of them. And when Keith died, it was just a terrible blow to both of us, but most especially to Walter, I'm sure. And he wrote this poem about attending his funeral, and he was asked to speak at the funeral, and he was a nervous wreck. So this is called Ash. Friends gather in their group of memory and celebrate the bodiless click and song of a darkened wood, the restored house with its 3 windows edged by blue, red, and crystalline squares of stainless glass, the raised arm of a green ceramic Buddha. Think also of those lost years, a woman in a pre-dawn acid high, running in rain through the city's cobblestone streets, her long cape flapping like wings of some flightless bird, moonlight and a barroom's neon glare across the hood of a white 55 Ford in summer, and a 1930s Buck Rogers poster, and a question, is this man really 2,000 years ahead of his time? And that ZZ Hill lyric, Woo-wee bop, baby, I'd chop off my right arm for you. Now, children of the Father who last week became ash, sit together in their loud silence. The widow quietly folds her hands. Someone delivers trays of food and places them on tables draped in white cloth. Then it's my turn to speak. I know nothing of death, but I remember once having been called by the quick signature of lightning bugs. His small daughter brought me to an open field where she discovered her name among a constellation of stars. That was Walter's poem, which makes me sad. And I actually prepared a couple of poems to read by Adrienne Rich, who was a great influence on my life, my poetry. I met Adrienne Rich's poetry, never her, in about 1973, the fall of 1973. There were no bookstores in the town I lived in, and for my birthday every year what I would do is take myself on a bus to Boston and go to the Harvey Coop, and I would stay over at the Y overnight. They had the Y for women there. You could stay for about $10 for a night, and it was an amazing experience. Every year I'd come home with an armload of, my reading for the year. And this book at the time, I was 20, I was kind of living on the streets, and this book, The Will to Change, I think got it for its title because I was looking for some way to change my life and come into my life. I was taking night courses and, just working waitress jobs or whatever, and looking for a way to write and looking for a life, I guess. So this book, I ended up really loving it and carrying it around with me everywhere, wherever I moved. Whenever I traveled, I brought it with me. Whenever I went to, for a while I went to, it's not Shakers, now I've forgotten the kind of church it was. I'm having an Alzheimer's moment. But where you didn't say anything. Quakers. Thank you. Quakers.
Rhymes with.
Yeah.
Rhymes with.
So I'd take it there and get up and read a poem and, that kind of thing. So I did that for years. And I'm still reading it. I'm rereading it now. So I've just reread it again and written a poem to respond to some of it. But I want to read just these. I'll just read these two short pieces because I'd yak too much. This is out of the shooting script poem in the book. It's in 14 pieces. I'll just read these two short ones, and then you'll see what I mean about it being an inspiration for someone looking for a life. We had driven to odd attempts. Once it would not have occurred to me to put out in a boat, not on a night like this. Still, it was an instrument, and I had pledged myself to try any instrument that came my way, never to refuse one from conviction or incompetence. A long time I was simply learning to handle the skiff. I had no special training, and my own training was against me. I had always heard that darkness and water were a threat. In spite of this, darkness and water helped me to arrive here. I watched the lights on the shore I had left for a long time. Each one, it seemed to me, was a light I might have lit in the old days. And that's another thing I like about Rich. She never goes on in her life without taking her whole life with her. I think that's incredibly important. Whatever it was, the grains of the glacier caked in the boot cleats, ashes spilled on white formica, the death call viewed through power glasses, the cube of ice melting on stainless steel. Whatever it was, the image that stopped you, the one on which you came to grief, projecting it over and over on empty walls, now to give up the temptation of the projector, to see instead the web of cracks filtering across the plaster, to read there the map of the future, the roads radiating from that initial split, the filaments thrown out from that impasse, to reread the instructions on your palm, to find there how the lifeline broken keeps its direction, to read the etched rays of the bullet hole left years ago in the glass, to know in every distortion of the light what fracture is, to put the prism in your pocket, the thin glass lens, the map of the inner city, the book with the gridded pages, to pull yourself up by your own roots, to eat the last meal in your old neighborhood. Thank you.
Maybe I was supposed to call up somebody.
No. Susan Sexton, is that right?
One of the things that I enjoy most about having the gift of writing poetry, good or bad, just wanting to do it, is the feeling sometimes of being able to give a voice to somebody who didn't have one, be they alive or be they dead. And this was a little girl that I knew about 20 years ago now. It's called Guilt. 6 years old, she told me her story, sitting on the playroom floor, moving her dolls in and out of a patch of sunlight on the carpet, bathing them in the light, dipping them into a pool of warmth and safety. I should have saved him, she said, of her dead, suffocated baby brother. What could you have done, I asked. She looked up, eyes full of more sadness than her years could hold. Mommy went to sleep on him. If I'd come downstairs, I could have picked him up and saved him. Weep for them. The lost baby, addicted mother, a child bereft. She is their witness, carries the burden of love and grief, a guilt she did not earn. Sorrow words cannot reach, and time will not erase.
And Ruby, Boy?
I think I'll pass because I misunderstood your.
That's all right. Come on up.
All right.
There's no misunderstanding.
But I'm not dead yet.
That's the right thing.
Because we
We
will
aren't
be dying,
either.
so just go ahead and do it.
All too true. And you know, I've enjoyed this so much because I wanted to ask you, who was the mentor or the person at Central Michigan University?
That was Bill. He was in.
But you said there was someone at Central that was doing.
It was the guy doing his was
Yeah.
literary executor. I'm not sure what I can't remember what his
I
name
wonder.
was.
That was where I.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I went to school there. And had I paid more attention to the
Oh.
purpose, I would be reading right now from the works of Carol Arnett, also known as Gogizgi, his Cherokee name, who was for a long time head of the creative writing department at Central Michigan
I knew
University.
he hadn't been. He was a younger guy. He hadn't been there that long.
Yeah.
You don't remember his name, do you?
Nope.
Yeah.
Oh well,
Sorry.
it was,
Oh,
it was
what a
nice.
coincidence.
So, I mean, I really love this idea.
It's probably in that book.
Yeah.
In Bill Nutt's.
In Bill Knott's book,
I
yeah.
think in Tom Lux's introduction.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll look. I'll read just a couple of poems then. This first one is appropriate to where we are now. First Sunday following the first full moon after the vernal equinox. We all have our rocks to roll away. No sacrilege in saying so. no crime in new beginnings. Roll away the real world, reel away the old world. Dare to face east and wait for the dawn. What the titmouse taught me. Don't be afraid. Look for the good stuff. Take what you find. Fly away singing. And this is a poem about Michigan, in a way, and where I grew up. Not all that far from Howell, Michigan. Taking the bait. Let me also add that this was written for some of those people in that creative writing program at Central Michigan University. Sure, and we have missed our calling. All those years in academe, the jobs for universities, non-profits, even industry. And the good ones, house painting and Christmas tree sales. None of these were where we belonged. It seems so clear in hindsight. A shack by the river or lake in the UP. A big tub of minnows and a nice collection of worms. Night crawlers, red worms, the usual suspects. A few Zepco reels and poles on the wall. Some bobbers, line, hooks, nets, jitterbugs, spinners, and spoons. Canvas creels and rubber waders. The good life could have been ours.
This is gonna be by Galway Cannell, who I got to meet once. I don't know if you remember her Bread and Puppet in Vermont. He lived in Vermont. He would go there, and they had a little thing out in the woods. There's some bees right there. He liked bees, and I was going to read something by Tagore too, who loved bees, and I love bees. I got off subject though, but I met him there, and I shook his hand, and it was really cool to meet him. He read the most amazing poem about taking a shit in the middle of the night. And that was one of the things that changed me.
That's poetic.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But I'm not going to read that one. This poem is probably, 25-year-old poem, and I remember reading this in my late teens, and it felt like it had a message for me. Another night in the ruins. In the evening, haze darkening on the hills, purple of the eternal, the last bird crosses over, flop, flop, adoring only the instant. 9 years ago, in a place that rumbled all night above the Atlantic, I could see, lit up by lightning bolts jumping out of it, a thunderhead formed like the face of my brother, looking down on blue lightning-flashed moments of the Atlantic. He used to tell me, "What good is the day? On some hill of despair, the bonfire you kindle can light the great sky. Though it's true, it turns out, to make it burn, you have to throw yourself in. Wind tears itself hollow in the eaves of these ruins, ghost flute of snowdrifts that build out there in the dark, upside-down ravines into which night sweeps, our cast wings, our ink-spattered feathers. I listen. I hear nothing. Only the cow of such hollowness, mooing down the bones. Is that a rooster? He thrashes in the snow for a grain, finds it, rips it into flames, flaps, crows, flames bursting out of his brow. How many nights must it take one such as me to learn that we aren't, after all, made from that bird that flies out of its ashes? That for us, as we go up in flames, our one work is to open ourselves, to be the flames.
And Mike will be starting things up in September, right, Mike? That going to work for you?
Yeah.
All right, so second week in September, and
Where am I starting?
you're gonna be the next season here.
Here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're kicking things off.
Feature, yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
we got Nancy Jean.
So I'm going to read Ruth Stone. I met her at the Eagle Pond series. I think it was maybe 2003. She was 88 years old. She had macular degeneration, and her daughter had brought her to the reading. They had that series that Donald Hall started up there in Plymouth, at Plymouth State. And she made a huge impression on me. It's the only time I ever met her. She had, she's 88 years old. She had bright red hair down to like her waist. And she had, like I said, she had macular degeneration, and she had pieces of paper because she had everything in huge print so that she could read it. So it looked like she was going to read forever when she was up there at first, but she explained. But the thing that really hit me about her, I was a late bloomer to writing poetry. Compared to a lot of people, I was 39 when I started writing poetry. And I felt like I'd sort of lost some time because I started so late, and I really didn't do anything, like even put work out there until I was well into my 40s. Probably close to 50. And she, after she got done reading, she was signing books. And everyone that was in the line, she took time with, and she asked them questions about themselves. And when it got to be my turn, she asked me a bunch of questions, and I answered her. Whoops. I guess I have to fix these before I can. Sorry. Caught up in the scarf. And she signed my book. And this is what it looks like. It just really, because she couldn't see very well. And she says, "Darling Nancy, darling Nancy," she just met me. "I hope to read your book soon. I am overjoyed that you are writing, and at this time, love from Ruth Stone." I was just, and what she did for me was let me know that I wasn't too late. She's 88 years old, and she was up there reading, and that I might even have a lot of time left, who knows, to read my poetry and write. So I'm going to start with what we don't know. She was very much of a political poet, and she was very concerned about the environment. What we don't know. It is Wednesday, my day off. The neighborhood quiet. My cat's pulse, tails up, like submarines scanning the surface. Last night, through the lifted window, melting snow released an ozone sting. Last night, I twisted in the arms of a heavy book on radioactive pollution. I have gone through its troubled corridors. In its inner labyrinths, I have eaten the survivors, the mutilated bodies, the cancers of children. Like fruitcake sliced in the kitchen at 3 a.m., all this only whets the appetite. The insomniac leaning against the door jamb. Now it's 11 a.m. on Wednesday. The area ordinary, as usual. Fog beads along the wires. Last night's implant in the brain, useless information after the facts, like the gradual glitch of shifting faults, almost unnoticed. In the way two birds streak through the air, in the wing language of April, above them the dark metaphor of two soundless fighter jets. And then a couple of shorter poems. Rising. In the government offices, the rules and regulations regarding erosion of beaches move from one file to another.
The sand whispers back into the undertow. At the South Pole, part of the frozen continent splits and melts, eating into the ice pack. Along the eastern seaboard, a house on the ocean is lifted on stilts. It walks into the water. The piles driven deep into the sand are at last exposed, their thin bones fragile as tiny starfish. The windows, blank eyes of dead seagulls, catch the phosphorescence in the choppy waves. The waves are as even as furrows in a cornfield. But the house is moving in the opposite direction. How mild the evening is. No one would suppose that the house is going out with the tide. And this book, she won the National Book Award for. It's in the next galaxy, so I'm going to read the title poem, which is another fairly short poem. In the next galaxy, things will be different. No one will lose their sight, their hearing, their gallbladder. It will be all Catskills with brand new wraparound verandas. The idea of Hitler will not have vibrated yet. While back here, they are still cleaning out pockets of wrinkled Nazis hiding in Argentina. But in the next galaxy, certain planets will have true blue skies and drinking water. Thanks.
Harvey, Septa.
I'm just going to read one poem from each book, so don't get frightened. I promise. In looking through my poetry collection, I was amazed at how many great poets that I've heard or know or really loved who died in the last 10, 20, 30 years. It's actually shocking. So this is just a few of them, really. Maybe I'll read a poem. Mike read a poem by Galway Cannell. I'll read one by him. St. Francis and the Sow. The bud stands for all things, even for those things that don't flower. For everything flowers from within of self-blessing, though sometimes it is necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness, to put a hand on its brow, the flower, and retell it in words and in touch. It is lovely until it flowers again from within of self-blessing. As St. Francis put his hand on the creased forehead of the sow and told her in words and in touch, blessings of earth on the sow, and the sow began remembering all down her thick length. From the earthen snout all the way through the fodder and slops to the spiritual curl of the tail, down through the great broken heart to the sheer blue milking dreaminess, spurting and shuddering from the 14 teats into the 14 mouths of sucking and blowing beneath them, the long, perfect loveliness of sow. One of my favorite poets has been Czeslaw Milosz, who I actually got to hear read at UNH about 20 years ago, something like that, 20 or 30 years ago. Let's see.
I was at that reading.
What? You were at that?
I was at that reading.
Yeah, it was actually in a chemistry room or something.
Yeah,
it was like in a lecture hall. And the poem was called Late Ripeness. Not soon, as late as the approach of my 90th year, I felt a door opening in me, and I entered the clarity of early morning. One after another, my former lives were departing like ships together with their sorrow.
and the country, cities, gardens, the bays of seas assigned to my brush came closer, ready now to be described better than they were before. I was not separated from people. Grief and pity joined us. We forget, I kept saying, that we are all children of the King. For where we come from, there is no division into yes and no, into is, was, and will be. We were miserable. We used no more than 100th part of the gift we received for our long journey. Moments from yesterday and from centuries ago, a sword blow, the painting of eyelashes before a mirror, of polished metal, a lethal musket shot, a caravel staving its hull against a reef, they dwell in us, waiting for a fulfillment. I knew always that I would be a worker in the vineyard, as are all men and women living at the same time, whether they are aware of it or not. Okay. Another poet who died, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, is a Philip Levine, who I like very much. Let's see. Some of his poems are rather long. Okay, well, this one is not too bad, just a page. It's called One Day. Beside him, trying to describe the sea as I had seen it, but it was lost, distant and unseen, perhaps no longer there under a low sky. I tried to tell him how the waves darkened and left only the sound of their breaking, and after a silence we learned to bear, it all came back. He turned away to the wall and slept, and I went out into the city. It was I who'd held his wife and felt the small bones of her back rising as falling as she did not cry. Later I would see my son from a distance and not call out. I would waken that night beside a sleeping woman and count each breath. Soon it was summer afternoon. The city hid indoors in the great heat. The hot wind shriveled our faces. I said, "They're gone." The light turned from red to green and we went on. "If they're not here," you said, "where are they?" We both looked into the sky as though it were as though it were our only home. We drove on. Nothing moved, nothing stirred in the oven of this valley. What was there left to say? The sky was on fire. The air streamed into the open windows. We broke free beyond our car lots, the painted windows, the all-night bars, the places where the children gathered, and we just went on and on as far as we could into a day that never ended. Okay. Let me read a poet who's not very well known. I think he should be better known than he is. It's Larry Levis.
Oh, yeah.
He died, I think, in the 90s.
Time ago.
Something like that. He only lived to be 50.
There's a film, a documentary
Something
just
like that,
came
what?
out. Documentary just came out about him in the last couple of months.
Really?
So most of his poems are rather long, so I'm just going to read one section of a poem. He was an amazing poet, then, actually. Slow child with a book of birds. The snow that has no name is just this snow, falling so thick it seems to pause a moment in midair. When I had stared long enough at it, the word that held it showed me only a swirling without a name, a piece of untalkative sky intact above a row of houses and blankness filling the frames of every doorway. a white that made the dark around it visible. Yesterday, the slow child on the bus, talkative amidst the fully evolved quiet of those around us, muffled in their parkas, was showing me a snowy egret in the book he carried. "No regrets," he said, pointing to his eyes, to a brassy, unassailable candor in them. "No regrets," he said again, for the pleasure of it, and smiled, absorbed in it. The pages dog-eared, stained by crumbs, milk, snow wonder in his sweating hand. No regrets in his thin blue windbreaker, disappearing into the swirling street. And knowing I saw the rest of that whole freezing, overcast day, remembered how to treat the day as decently. Why was it that the child's eyes, in a flesh that held the pallor of putty, outshone all others then? And why, in the rush hour traffic, did he begin to laugh out loud at something no one saw? At the joke the falling snow was telling him? "Dodo, look out where you're going," I thought, as a chorus of horns escorted him, king of all the lifted, unrented dark of the office buildings that rose around us there, still smiling as he crossed against the light, and then waving with a studied formality to each swearing, skidding driver, the dark street turning slowly white. Okay. Another poet that I have read, quite a guy, is Franz Wright. As you probably know, his father, James Wright, was a famous poet, and both he and his father won the Pulitzer Prize in poetry. So Franz was a rather disturbed person with a lot of personal difficulties, but he wrote some amazing poems. He died around 52, actually. Okay. Why didn't I mark which poem I wanted to read? The poem is called One Heart. I think it's just, yeah. It is late afternoon, and I have just returned from the longer version of my walk nobody knows about. From the first time in nearly a month, and everything changed. It is the end of March. Once more, I have lived. This morning, a young woman described what it's like shooting coke with a baby in your arms. The astonishing windy and altering light and clouds and water were, at certain moments, you. There was only one heart in my body. Have mercy on me. The brown leaves buried all winter, creatureless feet, running over dead grass, beginning to green. The first scentless violet here and there returned. The first star noticed all at once, as one stands staring into the black water. Thank you for letting me live for a little as one of the sane. Thank you for letting me know what this is like. Thank you for letting me look at your frightening blue sky without fear, and your terrible world without terror, and your loveless, psychotic, and hopelessly lost with this love.
Thank you, Harvey. Jessica Purdy.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Thanks, Mark, for coming up with this great idea. Of course, as I was thinking about it, I picked dead poets, and then I forgot about that part, and I picked a live poet. So, but this was, I was a student at Emerson as well, and a grad student there, and I had Joyce Pesseroff as my professor, and she introduced me to Jane Kenyon's work because she thought that I would find it inspiring. Jane Kenyon had died like a year before I met Joyce, so Joyce and Jane were friends and had worked together in workshopping their poems. So I was going to read one by Joyce, who is not dead, and then one by Jane Kenyon. So this is from A Dog in the Lifeboat by Joyce Pesseroff. The Red Rocker. The red rocker and the yellow field, full of idle flowers, face each other like two sides of an argument. The rocker is empty. Feathery tips of goldenrod touch 1,000 insects promiscuously. The air is full of dragonflies, the size of birds. First 1, then 5, now a convention. Imagine a convention swooping over, fields as yellow as a crock of butter. It is better to sit and rock in the red rocker and know the greediness of everything for its food and flower. No one visits, says, time hasn't changed a hair of you, something over which I have no control. I feel the emptiness of something built for motion, stilled. Headlights of the odd car balloon and swerve. Last night, where the sun set, there was a glow, as if behind Watch Hill a house had burned to the ground. And this is the bookmark. This found the bookmark of Bill Knott's in her book, which was circa 1996. So then you all probably know who Jane Kenyon is. Donald Hall's wife. She was poet laureate. She died in 1995. This is called Insomnia. The almost disturbing scent of peonies presses through the screens, and I know without looking how those heavy white heads lean down under the moon's light. A cricket chafes and pauses, as if distracted or preoccupied. When I open my eyes to document my sleeplessness by the clock, a point of greenish light pulses near the ceiling. A firefly. In childhood, I ran out at dusk, a jar in one hand, lid pierced with air holes in the other, getting soaked to the knees in the long, wet grass. The light moves unsteadily, like someone whose balance is uncertain after traveling many hours, coming a long way. Get up and let it out. But I leave it hovering overhead in case it's my father, come back from the dead, to ask, why are you still awake? You can put grass in their jar in the morning. Thanks.
I expected to see more people because it feels as if we're full of poets in the room, us and them, the other ones who came along for the ride. So I had teachers, but I didn't really have a mentor. I had certainly ancestors, literary ancestors. And at some point when I was around 50, I read Stanley Kunitz's book, Next to Last Things, that he wrote when he was 82. So I liked that he thought he would have something else after 82. And the book is mostly essays, interviews, and I started reading what made sense to me as what it meant to be a poet. There was a lot of hyperbole about what that was, but Stanley kind of made it simple. So when he was 90 and I was around 50, I made a pilgrimage to Provincetown, and I went into a bookstore and said, could you tell me what Stanley Kunis's phone number is? And she said, well, let's look it up. I called him, and he said, come visit. So I went and visited him, and from his 90th year to his 100th year, I made visits to see him. The last one was when he was 100. He had already had his birthday. And I visited him in the village and brought him a rock from the beach in Rye for his birthday present. And the woman who was his sort of, not custodian, but helping to take care of him was this lovely young woman. And she said to me, he's not doing well today, so go, don't stay long. So we chatted a little bit, and I said, Stanley, I think it's time for me to go. And he said, what's the rush? So what I'd like to do is read to you his words about writing, and then I'd like to read to you one of his poems to give you a sample as to why, when I started reading what he said about poetry, I said, that's it. That's what I needed. This is from the Wild Braid. And he published this when he was 100, and he died in his 100th year. But he says things like this earlier on as well. And I think in a way it summarizes why what we're doing here. When you look back on a lifetime and think of what has been given to the world by your presence, your fugitive presence, inevitably, you think of your art, whatever it may be, as the gift you have made to the world in acknowledgement of the gift you have been given, which is life itself. And I think the world tends to forget that this is the ultimate significance of the body of work each artist produces. That work is not an expression of the desire for praise or recognition or prizes, but the deepest manifestation of your gratitude for the gift of life.
Wow.
Indeed. He said he wrote this poem after several of his friends had died too young. The Long Boat. When his boat snapped loose from its mooring under the squeaking of the gulls, he tried at first to wave to his dear ones on shore. But in the rolling fog, they had already lost their faces. Too tired even to choose between jumping and calling, somehow he felt absolved and free of his burdens, those mottos stamped on his name tag, conscience, ambition, and all that caring. He was content to lie down with the family ghosts in the slop of his cradle, buffeted by the storm, endlessly drifting. Peace, peace, to be rocked by the infinite, as if it didn't matter which way was home, as if he didn't know. He loved the earth so much, he wanted to stay forever. Yay, Stanley.
Bill Burtis.
Am I it?
No, I feel the same way.
Okay. I'm getting older and older.
Oh, lucky you.
Now I'm 101. So I have 4 books here by Donald Justice. It was my intention to read a poem from each book. But I would like, if I can find it, to read a poem by James Tate, who I had the privilege of taking a like a seminar with, but let's see if I can. I don't know. I guess not. Anyway, but I'll tell the story. Do you know the poem Pride's Crossing? Tate's poem, Where the Railroad Meets the Sea, Where the Railroad Meets the Sea. It's just a lovely, lovely poem. It has the most fabulous incantatory nature, and it was the first poem that just kind of went boom, you know, that came alive. It was like one night, I was 22 years old, I was trying to write poems, and I couldn't, and I had it up on my wall, and I think because I couldn't understand, I didn't know what it was about, it didn't make any sense, but I loved it, Where the Railroad Meets the Sea. And then one night it was like, holy shit, I got it, you know? And some years later I was driving up to Gloucester with some friends from Boston. And we're driving along, we're a little, you know, we've had a little, and so there was some, it was augmented, and there's a railroad track, and there's moonlight on the railroad track, and then there's moonlight on the railroad track and water, and we go around a corner and there's this giant white sign that says Pride's Crossing, and I completely lost it. They figured I was gone, but I didn't know anything about it. I figured it was a metaphor. Anyway, Donald Justice. So Donald Justice was my advisor in graduate school. He was a pretty austere guy. He was very tall, and he didn't smile a lot. But he actually was a wonderfully kind and, in fact, very gentle guy. But he was scary to be, you know. Plus, he was Donald Justice. I mean, one of the first times I met him, I was waiting to go into meet my advisor. And I was waiting outside of his office, and I was reading Wishes, Lies, and Dreams, you know, the children's poetry book. And he walked up and he saw me, grabbed it out of my hand. He said, "For God's sake, don't read that." He said, "They'll ruin you. They're so much better than we are. We should leave it all to them." So I hitched a ride with him to Chicago with the poet Monroe Lerner, and Justice was driving, and the fiction writer Dan Wakefield was in the passenger seat, and Monroe and I are in the back, and we're sort of chatting. All of a sudden, Monroe goes, "Shh." We listen, and they're saying something to each other occasionally, but it makes no sense. And I finally realized they were playing chess in their heads on the way to Chicago. And we were going up to see the Cubs. We were dumb. We didn't. Anyway, from the summer anniversaries, which won the Lamont Poetry Prize in 1959.
What year is that, Bill? What are you holding?
59.
Well, it won the Lamont in 59.
Wow.
Yeah. The Poet at 7. On the porch, across the upturned chair, the boy would spread a dingy counterpane against the length and majesty of the rain, and on all fours crawl in it like a bear to lick his wounds in secret in his lair. And afterwards, in the windy yard again, one hand cocked back, release his paper plane, frail as a May fly to the faithless air. And summer evenings he would whirl around faster and faster till the drunken ground rose up to meet him. Sometimes he would squat among the foul weeds of the vacant lot, waiting for dusk and someone dear to come and whip him down the street, but gently home. I asked him if that was him. He said, "Someday you'll learn not to ask questions like that." I moved to New Hampshire I was at Iowa from 71 to 73, and I moved to New Hampshire in 75, and a couple of us started to get a poetry series going at what was then the Aaron Conant Coffee House right on the edge of Strawberry Bank. And Charlie Simic was kind enough to come and read and kind of help get things going, and he invited some people and so on. And I corresponded with Justice a little bit, and I told him that we were doing that. And I got a phone call one night, and he said, I'm going to be in Boston, it was like Tuesday. I'm going to be in Boston on Friday at BU reading. Can I come up? Would you let me come up and read at the coffee house?
Wow.
Right?
What should that be?
I said, what do you mean? Well, sure, fabulous, sure, great. The only problem is, it's Tuesday. He's coming on Friday. Nobody knows. I tacked signs all over Portsmouth on phone poles and put up a poster at the Little Professor. Remember the Little Professor?
Yeah. Did you have a good turnout?
No. But he didn't care. We probably had 18 or 20 people. I mean,
Oh, well, that's
which for the Aaron
turnout.
Conant
Yeah.
it looked good anyway.
Yeah.
But, this isn't what I wanted to read. Uh-oh. Something happened. How did my bookmark move?
I wasn't anywhere
Marked
near
it.
it.
Yeah.
I wasn't anywhere near
There it is. There it is. I
I
found it.
swear to God.
It's called Heart. This is from Nightlight, this is my favorite one. Heart, let us this once reason together. Thou art a child no longer. Only think what sport the neighbors have from us, not without cause. These nightly sulks, these clamorous demonstrations. Already they tell of thee a famous story, an antique balding spectacle such as thou art, affecting still that childish, engaging stammer with all the seedy innocence of an overripe pomegranate. Henceforth, let us conduct ourselves more becomingly. And still I hear thee beating thy little fist against the walls. My dear, have I not led thee, dawn after streaky dawn, besotted home? And still these threats to have off as before, from thee who wouldst lose thyself in the next street? Go then, O my inseparable, this once more, and afterwards we will take thought for our good name. He certainly had a sense of humor. I had the privilege of setting type and helping to bind this version of Departures. This also came out from, I don't remember in the paperback version, but this is from Penumbra Press. Pale, one of the things that Justice loved for him, sestinas, sonatinas, sonnets, on and on and on. But he wrote a lot of odes, which, isn't technically a form, but anyway. Pale tepid ode, not with the vague smoke in the curtains, not with the pigeons or doves under the eaves. Nevertheless, you are there, hidden, and again you wake me, scentless, noiseless, someone or something or someone faithless that will not return. Undiscovered star that fade and are fading, but never entirely fading, fixed and that will not return. Someone or something, colorless, formless, and that will not return. This is another, I also worked on this book, 16 poems. He was great friends with a fellow by the name of Kim Merker, who was a wonderful maker of books. And so he gave Kim these poems. Kim ran the Stonewall Press at the University of Iowa. And so I got to work on this one. And he showed up and said, because Kim, there was kind of, the press was in trouble, the university was going to throw him out, and came downstairs one day and said, here.
On the day of the departure by bus. Tell me if you were not happy in those days. You were not yet 25 and you had not yet abandoned the guitar. I should mention, by the way, that Justice was also pretty accomplished on the guitar, but especially in the blues piano. He was great. He was also a fearsome and dangerous poker player. On the day of the departure by bus. Tell me if you were not happy in those days. You were not yet 25 and you had not yet abandoned the guitar. I swore to you by your nakedness that you were a guitar. You swore to me by your nakedness that you were a guitar. The moon swore to us both by your nakedness that you had abandoned yourself completely. Who would not go on living? The typewriter will be glad to have become the poem, the guitar to have been your body, I to have had the luck to envy the sole of your shoe in the dead of winter. A passenger has lost his claim check, a brunette her barrette, and I think that there are moths eating holes in my pockets, that my place in line is evaporating, that the moon is not the moon, and the bus is not the bus. What is the word for goodbye?
All right, Priscilla, take us home. So don't forget, we're taking the summer off. We'll be back with Mike in September.
We're going to show up and read poems out on the street out there.
You are?
Yeah.
I'll come, let me know.
Yeah. We're going to protest.
Protest, absolutely. Well, so I too did not do the assignment, but I did think of Adrienne Rich, so I'm glad that she was. I spent a lot of time alone. I still do, but the Hawaiian Islands for 7 years. I kept returning. I thought I would live there, and I spent a lot of time with Adrienne Rich through her books. Fighting my way through all of them, arguing my way through with her. And that's really the first time I started writing because of open mic, because there were then, when I was first there in 2008, there was slam, it was just a feast. And when you had slam poets, they told stories. And then because everyone showed up, then everybody got better. And it didn't matter if you sucked, everybody, it's Hawaii, so everybody gets the best score and everybody laughs anyway if it's slam. But anyway, I discovered the Maui Poets Live, and then they discovered me, and I stayed on one place. I stayed in 11 places on that island, on Maui, which is one of the islands I was on. But one year I stayed on the flanks of Haleakala and in an old hunting cabin, which there aren't many of anymore, and on a flower farm. And during that time I met W.S. Merwin. And I will never forget, there's no way to describe what it is to look into that man's eyes. It's just absolutely piercing. And then to know, when you read his work, and you see how he's been acquainted with death and courted it for so long, and blindness. And then I heard the last time that he tried to read and he couldn't read, and I wondered why he didn't, do big print or something. And he just, was just, I'm doing my Oedipal thing now, and I'm just not doing this. And the other thing is, he always read with a tweed jacket. This is Maui, and he always looked like he just stepped off the lecture, as a lecture person. And also it was always his devotion to the environment, which for me is my absolute passion. So he's not dead. But
please God.
yeah, but so and then I always meet, the other thing was I always meeting people that know all these things about, you know, poets, and I didn't know anything about poets, and I didn't know anything about W.S. Merwin. And when I met him, it was like as if he knew me thoroughly, and as if I was just like him. And yet, he didn't allow interviews with anyone. No one in the islands could ever interview him. So I thought that was really interesting. So, first poem I want to read is called "For the Anniversary of My Death." Every year, without knowing it, I have passed the day when the last fires will wave to me, and the silence will set out tireless traveler like the beam of a lightless star. Then I will no longer find myself in life as in a strange garment, surprised at the earth and the love of one woman and the shamelessness of men, as today writing after 3 days of rain, hearing the wrens sing and the falling cease, and bowing not knowing to what. Okay, so he too does long poems. Can I read 2 poems? Is that all right? Everybody awake still? Okay. All right. So, the last one. Well, they made up their minds to be everywhere because why not? Everywhere was theirs because they said so. They thought so. They with 2 leaves, they whom the birds despise, in the middle of stones, they made up their minds, they started to cut. Well, they cut everything because why not? Everything was theirs because they thought so. It fell into its shadows, and they took both away, some to have some for burning. Well, cutting everything, they came to the water. They came to the end of the day, there was one left standing. They would cut it tomorrow, they went away. The night gathered in the last branches, the shadow of the night gathered in the shadow of the water. The night and the shadow put on the same head, and it said, now. Well, in the morning they cut the last one. Like the others, the last one fell into its shadow. It fell into its shadow on the water. They took it away, its shadow stayed on the water. Well, they shrugged. They started trying to get the shadow away. They cut right to the ground, the shadow stayed whole. They laid boards on it, the shadow came out on top. They shone lights on it, the shadow got blacker and clearer. They exploded the water, the shadow rocked. They built a huge fire on the roots, they sent up black smoke between the shadow and the sun. The new shadow flowed without changing the old one. They shrugged, they went away to get stones. They came back, the shadow was growing. They started setting up stones, it was growing. They looked the other way, it went on growing. They decided they would make a stone out of it. They took stones to the water, they poured them into the shadow. They poured them in, they poured them in, the stones vanished. The shadow was not filled, it went on growing. That was one day. The next day was just the same, it went on growing. They did all the same things, it was just the same. They decided to take its water from under it. They took away water, they took away the water went down. The shadow stayed where it was before. It went on growing, it grew onto the land. They started to scrape the shadow with machines. When it touched the machines, it stayed on them. They started to beat the shadow with sticks. Where it touched the sticks, it stayed on them. They started to beat the shadow with hands. Where it touched the hands, it stayed on them. That was another day. Well, the next day started about the same. It went on growing. They pushed lights into the shadow. Where the shadow got onto them, they went out. They began to stomp on the edge. It got their feet. And when it got their feet, they fell down. It got into eyes. The eyes went blind. The ones that fell down, it grew over and they vanished. The ones that went blind and walked into it vanished. The ones that could see and still see, it swallowed their shadows. Then it swallowed them too, and they vanished. Well, the others ran. The others that were left went away to live if it would let them. They went as far as they could, the lucky ones with their shadows. He's also a terrific translator. I'm sure you folks all know that, but I was to discover that to my delight late. And this is the last one. For a coming extinction. Oh, speaking of extinction. So the other thing he did was, in haiku, he bought a tree farm, and he has brought back all these species of palm trees that were going extinct. And if you know anything about the way old pineapple farms were, the earth was just totally poisoned. So it's like a dream that, as all of us are going, oh, alas and alack, of all things, he brought this place back, and there he is. Then he has a new book out that's called Garden Time.
Mm-hmm.
So
great.
He's blind on his farm and not so blind. Okay, and he's done a lot for whales, so this is for that. For a coming extinction. This is before you get totally bummed out. 1967. Gray whale, now that we are sending you to the end, that great God, tell him that we who follow you invented forgiveness and forgive nothing. I write as though you could understand and I could say it. One must always pretend something among the dying. When you have left the seas nodding on their stalks, empty of you, tell him that we were made on another day. The bewilderment will diminish like an echo, winding along your inner mountains, unheard by us, and find its way out, leaving behind it the future, dead, and ours. When you will not see again the whale calves trying the light, consider what you will find in the black garden and its court, the sea cows, the great ox, the gorillas, the irreplaceable hosts, ranged countless, and foreordaining as stars our sacrifices. Join your word to theirs, tell them that it is we who are important.
All right, everyone, thanks for coming.